The last time we were talking about Bismarck, you remember? So I'll just put this up here to kind of remind us that Bismarck is instrumental in bringing about the unification of Germany. And we mentioned previously that the unification of Germany has similarities to the unification of Italy. And in fact, it's taking place at roughly the same time frame. And so we see that somebody like Bismarck is willing to use violence, bloodshed, warfare, but he also will use diplomacy. And we also mentioned that there were at least three main opponents, or people who would not be too happy about Germany being unified. That's Austria, Russia, and France. So I think maybe we ended with this screen last time, where we said basically he's going to have to fight, well, he didn't have to, but he decides to use war on three different small wars to bring about the unification of Germany. And I think we ended by talking about how war can unify people if, of course, you win and you don't fight. It doesn't drag on for a long time, that kind of thing. Also you have to sort of build the rationale for it with the people. Okay, so let's take a look then at the very first one, and that's with Denmark. Denmark, 1863. This is the same time as here in the United States we have the Civil War going on, just so you can sort of make that parallel in your mind. If you know the Civil War period in the United States history, we're basically at the same, roughly the same time period. The war or the conflict will break out over especially two small pieces of land, Holstein and Schleswig. Now, you probably heard of Holstein, right? Have you heard of Holstein cattle, Holstein cows? No? They're some of the most famous dairy cows, are Holstein cows. So if you most milk, a lot of milk cows really are from that sort of area originally. Anyway, it's a fertile area, but the main reason, of course, that it gets tied in here is that the people there speak German. They're German-speaking people, but they're under the oppressive thumb of the Danes. Denmark, right? Denmark hadn't really been that powerful since, the time of the Vikings, probably. But they did have this territory. I don't know if you've looked at a map, but maybe you should. If you look at a map of where Denmark is, it's on a peninsula that sticks up from Europe or from Germany. It's kind of up there on a peninsula. This is the territory closest to Germany, in the southern part of that peninsula. Well, since basically Bismarck and the Prussians are saying, here are our German-speaking brothers and sisters who are being oppressed by non-German-speaking people, those Danes, speaking Danish, and so forth. Well, this was meant to rally the German-speaking people behind a cause. The cause was to liberate German-speaking people from non-German-speaking people. I guess I'm putting it very as clearly as I can. But it was, we as Germans, we as German-speaking people have an affinity, so we're going to go help these people who are being controlled by an outside power. Okay? That's in a nutshell. So I told you, if you're going to sort of do a war, you sort of need a rationale. Why? Why fight Denmark, especially over these two small pieces of land? It's because the people there speak German. And the idea was these people don't want to be under the control of Denmark. All right. Now, interestingly, he is able, that is Bismarck, is able to actually bring the Austrians in on his side, even though the Austrians are one of the... Remember when I made that list of, of countries you'd have to worry about? Well, okay, you have to worry about mainly France, Russia, and Austria. Denmark wasn't on that list because they're not that powerful. But he identifies that there's territory that the Danes have that speak German. So this now becomes a cause. We're going to free them. And it actually brings in the Austrians on the side of Prussia. They don't want to be, they don't want people thinking they don't care about German-speaking people. Of course, we care about the German-speaking people as much as those Prussians do. And so they actually join in. So you actually have the Austrians and the Prussians, and they're going up against Denmark. So it's not really much of a, it's a very fast battle. And they win, and so Denmark says, hey, go ahead and take those two, leave us alone, take those two areas if you want them, And so that, it was a very quick war. So it had all of the things that I told you that a war that might unify people should have. It had a definable goal. We want to liberate these two territories that speak German from people that don't speak German. And we speak German, so they're kind of one of us. That's our goal. That's our cause. Secondly, it's a very winnable war. And thirdly, they do it quickly. So it does unify people, and they begin to see then the Prussians as leaders of all the German people and the liberators of these particular German people of Holstein and Schleswig. Well, what's the next war? I said there were three, right? The next one is actually against Austria. Austria, the ones who had just helped them recently. This is 1865, so it's about 2 years later. Austria is basically attacked by Prussia. Here the idea is that the Austrians were oppressing German-speaking people in Prussia and so forth, threatening. It was somewhat drummed up. It's sometimes called, I got AKA, also known as the Austro-Prussian War of 1865, or sometimes more commonly called the 7 Weeks' War. 7 Weeks' War, which is a nice description because it actually lasts 7 weeks. That's a pretty short war, right? And you got to be careful. Sometimes the length of wars in the name doesn't necessarily match exactly the length of the war. But this one does. All right, we had a 7 Days War. That's probably one of the shortest ones. That's much later. We have the 100 Years' War. If you remember that one, that's much earlier. But in fact, when you're on Jeopardy someday, as I'm sure you all will be, remember that the 100 Years' War lasted longer than 100 years. All right? So it doesn't last exactly 100 years. So it's a misnomer. So, when you win that one, you get your, $1,500. Just remember, send me, 10% or something. It would be nice, wouldn't it? I told you I had a guy that I had taken him on a trip. Did I tell you he was on Jeopardy? Did I tell you that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he never sent me anything.
He didn't win.
Well, he won a little, they don't. He got like $1,000 at the end or something. They always give him something. So I was expecting $10 from him, something. No, actually, I was really mad at him because he should have done a lot better. I know he should know. He should have known because I had actually told him several of the things that they asked him questions about, and he got it wrong. So if nothing else in this class, pay attention for when you're on game shows. It could help you out. Well, some people were reluctant to fight the Austrians, because Austrians do speak German, but they're not exactly like the Prussians. Of course, they are Catholic, Roman Catholic. The Prussians are Protestants. I think they thought the Austrians were a little, not as disciplined, a little undisciplined compared to, that's all right. That's okay. So we see then that both both are German speaking, but they are convinced. And we have a picture here. It's kind of a fuzzy picture of the 7 Weeks' War, or the Austro-Prussian War. To make a long story shorter, the Prussians win, and they win pretty handily in 7 weeks, because the Prussians were actually had been building up their military more than the Austrians, and they were also a little more industrialized. You know, they're using things like the telegraph and trains, and they're moving things around that way. They're using some new techniques, and of course they have a larger army. So again, it didn't take long to beat them. Now, in both cases, we see here with Denmark, those two territories, yes, those two German-speaking territories were added into Prussian territory, merged into the other German-speaking territory. But here in Austria, what are they going to do? They've defeated Austria. They're just going to take over Austria? Occupy Vienna? They moved all the way to the capital city of Vienna. No, basically after they defeat them, the Prussians leave. Interesting, right? You go to the trouble of fighting them, and then you defeat them, and then you just sort of walk away. Well, the point was, I think, to show we can beat them. We are the most powerful. No, we're not going to take their territory. We just want all you German-speaking people to know that if you're picking sides, right, and you're going to pick between the Austrians and the Prussians, just know that the Prussians are the ones that beat the Austrians, and we're the ones that, you probably ought to hitch your wagon to, so to speak, right? I got some water in here. Let me get that out. So, there you have it. So how about the Third War then? This one was an easy sell because, the Germans and the French have never really gotten along, right? Kind of like the British and the French don't get along. And so this is called the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871. So it lasts a little over a year, more like about 18 months, something like that. Franco for French, Prussian, of course, for the Prussians. So we see then that France is getting nervous. Why are they getting nervous? Prussia has built up its military. Prussia has defeated Denmark and added some territory. Now they've gone and defeated Austria pretty handily. And they're continuing to sort of militarize, and they're definitely on a kind of an expansion, at least the French feel they're wanting to expand. And so the French are nervous about what the Prussians' next move might be. Perhaps it would be to invade France and take it over. Well, all of this sort of gets escalates when William or Wilhelm, the leader of Germany, remember him, the king of Prussia, his cousin is offered the throne in Spain. Because remember, we have the Habsburg dynasty, of which all these guys are sort of interrelated. I think we talked about that, right? The nobility of one country ends up marrying the nobility of another country, or the rulers, because they have to find somebody of their same social standing. Anyway, his cousin is offered the throne of Spain as sort of part of the Habsburg dynasty. In the end, he doesn't take it. All right, so it's just, it doesn't happen. He refuses. But the French, this gets the French really nervous. What if Wilhelm and then his cousin, one is in a more unified Germany and the other one is in Spain? Now we're going to be surrounded, right, if we're France. So basically, they send a message that they wanted a guarantee from Wilhelm, from the Prussians, that they're never going to support one of his relatives controlling Spain. To which Wilhelm writes a reply and says, look, I can't control what all my relatives do. I'm not going to give you some assurance that none of my relatives are ever going to control Spain. That's pretty much what he said. Not his exact words. He's going to send it in a telegram. Remember I told you they're using telegrams now? Well, guess what? When he's going to send this telegram, but before it gets sent, his prime minister, it crosses his desk, right? Bismarck gets a hold of this telegram, and he actually edits it so that it sounds more threatening. Sort of like, well, you French, we'll do what we want, and you don't tell us what to do. If you do, you're going to be sorry, that kind of thing. So he kind of rewords it. He still says basically the same thing. I can't control my relatives. I'm not going to guarantee you none of my relatives will ever control Spain. But he puts it in a far more threatening way. Why? He wants to make the French react. He wants to provoke them. And it works. It provokes the French. And the French actually decide to attack Prussia in a preemptive way. So, well, we better attack them now before they get any stronger. And so the French actually attack the Prussians. But a lot of it comes as a result of this telegram, Ems telegram. Ems is a city, a town in Germany where it was sent from. So it's called the Ems telegram. And that's just kind of a name that's given to this entire event where the edited telegram is sent to the French, and the French decide to preemptively take care of, or try to take care of, the Prussians. Well, again, the French are no match for the Prussians. It's a pretty easy victory, although, granted, France is much bigger than Austria and certainly much bigger than Holstein and Schleswig, so it takes more than a year. It takes about 18 months or so. But it's a victory. So now they've defeated France. So what are they going to do? Are they going to occupy France, take it over, make Paris into their sort of secondary capital or something? No. They force the French to sign a surrender, and the Prussians leave. Wow, surprising again. Go to all that trouble to fight them. Well, in this case, they can say, look, we didn't start it. The French attacked us. We're just defending ourselves, and so we had to go and defeat them, and now that we've defeated them, they've had to surrender. They got a few concessions. There was a small piece of territory they did get, called Alsace and Lorraine, which is right between Germany and France, and it's been kind of passed back and forth between the two countries over the years, and so Prussia does gain that small territory. So at the end of these three wars, they've gained 4 small pieces of territory where it's mostly German-speaking people, but they have left France and Austria free. They didn't try to occupy it, control it. So we see then that through all of this, that the German-speaking people, most of them, of course the Austrians aren't going to come on board, but everybody else, remember we had all those little principalities, which I told you at the time of Martin Luther, there were over 300 little principalities of Germany. Of course, that's about 250 years before this, but there were lots of them. There were scores and scores of little German principalities They now all come under the umbrella and control of Prussia, and now we can officially begin to call Germany, Germany. We use the term Germany, but it certainly was not a unified country until now. So these three quick victories are going to propel Wilhelm or William from being the king of Prussia to being the Kaiser of Germany. By the way, anybody know where the word Kaiser comes from? Did I tell you that? That might have been a different Western Civ class. Yeah, it was. It comes from the name Caesar. Caesar. The word Kaiser is a sort of derivation of the word Caesar, just like the word Tsar in Russia is derived from the word Caesar. So that name Caesar sort of continues on in different ways, that may be unexpected ways, right? Anyway, so he's now the Kaiser of Germany. All these small principalities of German-speaking people all have one ruler now. One unified government will emerge. And the Prussians returned almost all the land. They returned all the land of Austria. They returned everything back to Denmark except for Holstein and Schleswig. They're going to return all of France back except for Alsace and Lorraine, which are two narrow pieces of land that are right along the border still today of Germany and France. Well, in the process then, what Bismarck has orchestrated through these three small wars, I guess I'll call them, three quick wars, three very achievable wars. You know, it's easier to conquer a place than it is to take it over. And those are two different things, right? It's easier to defeat the French than it is to then stay and occupy France and actually control it for the long term. Same with Austria. And so, you know, Bismarck has, you know, he's not looking to really expand Prussia beyond the German-speaking areas. And not even to Austria, which was German-speaking. You know, leave it for now, right? Perhaps they'll join us one day. Well, it's going to be a long time before Austria joins, and they won't join freely. It's going to be World War II, right? When Hitler invades Austria. Hitler was born in Austria, by the way. Well, anyway, that's another story for another day. But he does this, and he does it quickly. And now Germany, almost all the German-speaking people, except for Austria, are united under one German-speaking ruler, the Kaiser of Germany. And then Bismarck changes his tactic. He then becomes a diplomat instead of a warrior. He said he would unify it with blood and iron. He did. And now, what you might expect to say, okay, once Germany sort of gets everything together, then they're going to launch into a big battle, right, and take over more territory, you know, maybe go back and actually take over France and occupy it, or Austria, or maybe move on Russia or something, take over Eastern Europe, more of the territories there. That really wasn't his plan. That wasn't his goal. His goal, he had a goal. The goal was to unite the German-speaking people under the leadership of Prussia. He had done that. Then his goal became to maintain that and to establish a very stable government in Central Europe that is going to last. And he does. He does. So Germany will stay very stable until they stop following Bismarck's ideas, and that's when we get World War I. Right? So we have a balance of power through treaties. Well, here is a map that shows us the territories. You'll notice up here, Schleswig and Holstein. You see that? There's Denmark. See how it's a peninsula that sticks way up peninsula sticks way up, goes on even past the map, goes off our screen. Denmark keeps going up there north on that peninsula. So rather isolated up there. But Schleswig and Holstein, you can see, is much closer to the rest of Prussia, or in this now Germany. So that was the first areas that they took. And here is Alsace and Lorraine in that purple circle. See, it's right along the border between France and Germany. And in fact, that territory has changed hands more than once. It's going to change hands again. I don't know, I haven't counted it up, but you could easily see that changing hands 4 or 5 times over the years, right? Because it is fertile land, good farmland, wine country, all that kind of stuff, and it is right on the border. So there are people there that speak German. There are people there to speak French. And then, of course, they also fight against Austria. They don't take any territory from Austria. They move all the way down to Vienna. You can see Vienna down there in the south. But they don't take all of they don't take all of Austria. They pretty much just march out. Now, Prussia is now united between East and West Prussia. You see way over there is, to the right of the screen is East Prussia. And this would actually be part of Poland and that sort of thing, so other countries today. And then you see the Russians come pretty much right up to their border and in what is Poland today, Warsaw. So the Russian Empire included Poland. So you can see why the Russians might get nervous, why the French might get nervous. But basically, this is the way things look. In 1871, Kaiser Wilhelm is in charge, and the United Germany is in place, and now Bismarck sets his mind to unifying all this territory. Okay? Any questions about that before we move on? I think it's a good example of one of the other things that's taking place here that we have kind of highlighted even before the test is nationalism. Nationalism. What is nationalism? I'll ask you. If you had a test question or a term that said, nationalism, I think there's some terms similar to that, right? What is nationalism? Do we have it today? Yeah, I've thrown a curve now, right? This is a curve. I'm not supposed to ask questions. Don't answer all at once. There!
It's like when they build the nation above all.
The nation above all?
The main priority.
Okay.
Or when the nation is from the state, it's the most important one.
Say that again. The nation.
If a country is from the state,
from the state,
it's the most important one. Or if it's something from the state, it's the most important above all
Okay.
the rest.
Yeah, part of the definition, I suppose, that's difficult is how do you define a nation? What makes a nation a nation? You might think we sort of use the word in the United States, nation, almost interchangeable with country. So we'll say we're going to listen to the national news or the national weather forecast or something like that, when really we're talking about the forecast for the country, all of most of North America. But nation is usually identified with people, not geography. So you can have a nation. You could have a nation that doesn't have a country, or you could have a nation that's divided up between several countries. I think about in the Middle East, for example. Maybe you've heard of people called Kurds. Heard about Kurds? Kurds. Kurds live in northern Iraq, northern Syria, and the southern part of Turkey, roughly. That's That's where the Kurdish people live. They speak a language called Kurdish. They have some of their own customs and so forth. And they normally are trying to be independent of those entities. So they don't get along well with the leadership of Iraq, Syria, or Turkey. And they identify themselves together. In fact, I'm sure some of them, maybe many of them, have a dream that someday there will be a Kurdish state, maybe called Kurdistan or something like that, right? But there isn't right now. It's divided into 3 parts. So if you study, say, the history of Iraq, part of the problem with the history of Iraq is in the north, that's Kurdish territory, and they have never, they were treated poorly by Saddam Hussein, and the leader of Syria has treated them poorly there, and in Turkey, they see them as terrorists as well. So anyway, so there is a group of people, you might call them a nation, the Kurdish nation, if you will, that does not have a country. They have territory where they live, but that territory is not unified, and that's just one example. Well, here in the United States, we have always had multiple ethnic groups, since the very beginning, right? We've had Spanish and British and so forth here. Then later Germans and Irish and, all different groups. So we are, in fact, I suppose you might say a nation, but maybe that looks a little differently. So anyway, when you think of nationalism, you're right when he says that it's putting your nation first. But there are many people who identify themselves as Americans, and they think being an American means something, right? And you are unified as Americans, and you have a culture that's American culture. We have American music, American movies, American food, I guess. Now, again, it's regional, but still, we tend to identify, if you leave the country, like when I go and travel in the Middle East, and there's another American, I happen to run into, there's an identification there. Language is a big part of it. Food and culture, religion, all these things are a part of nationalism, as well as symbols, like, say, the flag. The flag becomes a symbol of the nation. Maybe certain music or songs, a national anthem, things like that. So, at any rate, nationalism is playing a part here. Here you've got German people that are in different political entities, some under Denmark, some under France, some under Prussia, some under Austria. And now the attempt here is to unify all of them. Now, they leave the Austrians be, but the rest of the German-speaking people are all brought, and there are a lot of small territories there. You can see some of them listed, like Bavaria, right? Schleswig, Holstein, Hanover. Yeah, there's a lot more that are there. Lots of small territories that are then brought into, not Prussia, we're going to call it now we start to call it Germany. But remember that Germany is now getting a late start as a unified nation. This is 1871, right? 1871. Britain has been around for a long time, and they've been establishing colonies and sailing all over the world, getting trade. They've got a navy that goes all over. They say the sun never sets on the British Empire. And then you've got Germany. It's just now formed in 1871. So they have a kind of inferiority complex, if a nation can have that. They have an idea that they need to catch up. They need to move quickly. They need to make it happen. Also added to this was a sort of philosophical belief. I mentioned him briefly even before the test when I was talking about Marxism. I mentioned a guy named Hegel. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I'm mentioning him again. Hegel was a German philosopher. You might call him a political philosopher. And what he says basically is that the world, the history of the world is like a line. It's linear. It has a beginning, it has an end, and it moves from point A to point B. Okay? It's moving towards a goal, and it's a goal that God wants. God is directing history, according to Hegel, through what he calls the dialectic. I mentioned the dialectic. That also gets mentioned with Marxism, because Marxism borrows a lot of the ideas of Hegel. So Hegel taught that the dialectic moved history forward according to a plan, and it was God's plan, and that certain people are really going to push that forward. People like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, right? They're going to move forward the conflict because basically Hegel said the way that things really move forward, the way that things really progress in history is through conflict, it's through warfare. When wars happen, things change. So you got a nice stable thing that gets established, right? Well, you had it here before this. You had France that was in charge, you had Russia that was in charge, you had Austria that was in charge, and then Germany was kind of unorganized. Prussia begins to get stronger and stronger. They come in and upset the balance and create a new balance, right? Which is now everything's going to have to readjust. This kind of equilibrium gets readjusted. So, that's also what Hegel's talking about. So there are a lot of people in Germany who are following the teachings of Hegel, who are also in the 19th century. So he's talking a lot about nation, fits right in with nationalism. But he's also talking about Germany in particular, that Germany's time will come. Germany's destiny will come. And it's God's will for this to happen. And so many people see how Bismarck orchestrates this and carries this out and sees that this really is what they believe, divine will. That God had established this path, this dialectic, these conflicts, and somebody like Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm at the helm to really bring Germany into its place. And now it's not going to stop there, but that Germany will go on to be much more powerful. All right? So in this are the roots, I believe, of what we end up seeing World War I and World War II, which are coming, is the idea that both Germany and Italy, who are definitely going to be partners in World War I and World War II, especially World War II. Italy starts off on Germany's side in World War I, but that's another story. But they're both playing this idea that they need to catch up. And of course, Germany has a lot more resources than Italy in this and a lot more will and drive. And they're the ones who are going to say, you know what, Germany can really become powerful. Now, add to that Kaiser Wilhelm I. He's going to be replaced by Kaiser Wilhelm II. Kaiser Wilhelm II is in fact related, you know, all these people are related, but he's related to Queen Victoria. Maybe you've heard of Queen Victoria, right? The Queen of England. In fact, Queen Victoria of England is related to virtually every monarch in Europe. She had a big birthday party. I forgot which one it was, her 70th or whatever, some anniversary that she'd been queen for a long time. Anyway, they invited all of her relatives to come. And basically they had, you know, people, the leaders of Russia, Germany, you know, France. I mean, everybody was there. All these nobility and all these monarchs are there, and Queen Victoria is their grandmother, their great aunt, their, you know, whatever. She is related to all of them. And so Kaiser Wilhelm II, who is related to the British, sees them as a model of what Germany should do and what Germany can be. He doesn't see any reason why Germany can't be like England, with a great navy, with territory around the world, an empire. And that's what he wants. That's not what Bismarck wanted. And so when that begins to happen, Bismarck will resign, and Kaiser Wilhelm II will go down a path that will ultimately lead to World War I. So that's kind of a precursor of things to come. Spoiler alert. All right? Yeah. All right. So that's nationalism. Nationalism is a powerful force, and it certainly grows in the 19th century, but it's there in the 18th century. I mean, I think in some, if you're looking for it, you could probably find it in different ways down through history. That is, groups of people who identify with each other and want to promote that. We certainly see it today, nationalism. You know, since the Cold War ended, we could debate exactly when it ended, but somewhere in the 1990s, early 1990s, the Cold War ended. And we can debate why it ended, but we won't do that right now. But let's just say it did end. Obviously, things changed. And the Soviet Union breaks apart. The Soviet Union had held together all kinds of different national territories under the umbrella of the Soviet Union. And once that happened, and we only have one superpower, which is the United States, and all that Soviet territory they directly controlled, and all the Soviet territory they indirectly controlled through funding from the Cold War and all that kind of stuff, everything gets readjusted over the last, let's say, 25 years. Everything began to readjust. So we saw wars in the Balkans, Serbia, Croatia. Why? Before, that had all been under the thumb of the Soviets. Now, each one has their own nationalistic ideas. You see Kurdistan, and you see a lot of territories which had once been sort of under the control, directly or indirectly, of the superpowers, especially the Soviet side of it. Now they're on their own. And so we see all kinds of things happening. It also becomes fertile ground for terrorism. Because in fact, the Cold War, that we will talk about later, but the Cold War, we had one main enemy. That was the Russians, that was the Soviets. The Soviets had their arsenal, we had our arsenal, and everybody kind of lined up on either side, and each side funded them, different countries, for their projects or whatever. So if you wanted military stuff, if you wanted funding, you had to pretty much pick a side. Almost everybody in the world had to pick a side, and did. But when that's gone, now you've got a lot of fledgling territories that no longer have the support of, say, the Soviets backing their dictator or whatever. They don't have the money, they don't have the military support. This allows local people, a lot of them nationalistic, some of them religious, to begin to take over. And it also means a lot of those weapons that had been stored there also come into play and start to get traded. And so we see an age of terror emerging. It's already there in the 80s and the 90s, but we really obviously recognize it in the early 2000s, right? 9/11 certainly brought it on everybody's radar screen in the United States. And so we have a whole new world order, I guess you might say, of terror, where we don't have, it's hard to go after because it's not a nation, it's not a country. Who do you go after for 9/11? Well, it was a lot of Saudi Arabians, but it was also people in Afghanistan, it was people in Iraq. There's other people helping. It's not one entity. Used to be if the Soviets did something, like if they were going to launch a nuclear weapon, Well, they knew that we knew where they lived. And we would launch a weapon at them. And so basically it was kind of a stalemate. But with terrorism, they're mobile. They move around geographically. So it makes it harder to sort of pin them down. Well, that's nationalism in part, which also leads its way into religious, maybe extremism, national extremism. Yes?
Do you think nationalism can scale down to like communities or like
Communities.
individuals maybe?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think a lot of tension that we have, like even here in the United States, is people, instead of identifying, say, with the United States as their nation, they're identifying themselves with some other group. And then those groups are at odds with one another, or can be at odds, politically as well as, unfortunately, also with violence and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of related. It depends on who you identify with as your nation, so to speak, or your group. So, are we all in this together? Are we all unified as Americans? Is that something that's really a nation or not? We used to be called a melting pot, right? The people would come and it all kind of get blended into being Americans. Then people started to call it a mosaic or a quilt, a patchwork thing or whatever. I don't know, I had other phrases for it. But no matter what those things are, it's starting to or it has fragmented. It is fragmented. Can we bring it back together? I think we can. I mean, I saw the United States really unify after 9/11. Really unify. Politically and racially and ethnically and all those things, because we were attacked. They attacked us. Okay, well, they attacked New York. They attacked Washington, D.C. They took a plane and it crashed in Pennsylvania. But people didn't just see it as New York's problem. They didn't just see it as Washington, D.C.'s problem. This was somebody attacking us. And so we became us, right? And I think the more that we can be us instead of them, us and them, instead of we're in this kind of together, the more that we can have that sort of, and that's tough these days. Well, anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Last question, sorry. What
No, it's no problem.
The key motivator of nationalism?
Key motivator?
Like identity or?
I think one of the strongest is language. Because if you can't communicate with one another, if you can't talk, if I speak and you don't understand me and you speak and I don't understand you, it's very difficult to explain yourself or to talk things over, that kind of thing, So I think, and that's usually the way people have been divided by historians and anthropologists over the years, has been their language group. If people speak the same language, then we tend to say they're in the same nation. So I think that's the first part. I think religion plays a big part of it as well. Other cultural, food and music and dance, all those kind of cultural things can also do it. Yes?
Do some people consider nationalism being a bad thing?
I think some people think nationalism is bad when it's unrestricted, I guess I'm sort of setting forth a kinder, gentler view of nationalism, that we ought to see ourselves as being unified. I'm talking about unity rather than just a promotion of one group.
How could that go bad?
What's that?
How can nationalism go bad?
How could nationalism go bad? Nationalism can sort of mutate into fascism. You're certainly going to see it. You're going to see it when we get to Germany in World War II. There it's taken the worst parts of nationalism and really mutating into fascism. And then we see that, if you're not German, then, and the way we define it, then you are the enemy and you're going to be eliminated. in the case of the Jews. Because, there were Jews that were, they were born in Germany, they spoke German, they were there, but they weren't considered to be German by this definition, this fascist definition. So yes, that kind of thing can happen where people identify so much with their group that they exclude others and then actually say, well, the other people are less than us or a threat to us, and so we go after them. Yeah, so I think that's probably what people would say would be the downside of nationalism. It could go too far. But I think the other way can also, if we're all fragmented, we can see that also can lead to, unfortunately, a lot of violence and conflict. Well, that was a little digression. I wasn't counting on it, but, it does relate to what we're talking about because nationalism becomes very important in the 19th century, and it's still important today. It's important in the 20th, and it's not gone in the 21st century. If you don't understand the concept of nationalism, it helps you understand why people do what they're doing, is how they identify themselves. Like, for example, today in Iraq. Iraq is not unified today, even though the United States has put a lot of effort, and other countries too, into trying to bring about a unified Iraq that would have, like a free government and all that sort of stuff. But it's divided into three big parts. Sort of north, central, and south geographically, but really in the north are the Kurds, have their own language, have their own culture. Then in the south you've got Arabs, but they're divided by Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims who do not get along, and the Sunni Muslims are actually the minority, although they were the ones who controlled the country for many years. Saddam Hussein was a Sunni Muslim who was imposing himself on Shia Muslims and Kurds. And so they're kind of in the center of the country. Well, let's move on. We've been talking about industrialization as well. And one of the things that comes as a reaction, a lot of times things in history are like a pendulum. You know a pendulum? We don't have too many pendulums around anymore. But clocks used to have pendulums. Like, say, a grandfather clock, some of them have a pendulum, right? Swings back and forth. And so if you think of history as having a pendulum effect, and I think it does, that we sort of go from one extreme to another extreme. In other words, we react. Something goes way over here, and then we react, and we kind of go way over here, and then we react, and it goes here. So there's a lot of reactions in history that actually lead to conflict and the events. And so it's easy to see. Now, one of the things that had swung way over, right, in medieval times is that we had a very strong adherence to religion, right? And sort of, some would say, opposition to learning. There wasn't as much, people didn't know how to read and write. To that then comes a kind of reaction over to what we've been talking about, which is enlightenment. Remember the Enlightenment? We talked about the scientific revolution. We talked about Enlightenment thinking and the philosophes and all that. And basically, those people hated the medieval period. The medieval period was, to them, everything that was wrong. They started calling it the Dark Ages, and there was no learning, and everybody was backwards, and religion was oppressing people, and so on and so on. So they reacted way over here. Now, this next movement we're going to talk about is the Romantic movement. The Romantic movement is reacting against Enlightenment. And guess what? If the Enlightenment guys hated the medieval stuff, the Romantic guys like it. If the Enlightenment guys hated religion, the Romantic movement people like religion. And so forth. And they do it with architecture. You start to see a revival of like Gothic architecture of the medieval period, and they call it Neo-Gothic. So, for example, one of the most famous is the Parliament in London. You often see pictures of the Parliament in London, Parliament building, Big Ben, the clock tower, and all that. If you take a look at that building, it looks very medieval. But it was built much later. But it's built to be a representation of, look, we're going to be looking at things differently. Well, that's what I want to talk about now, is that also sort of concurrently with the industrialization, which is sort of launching out of the scientific revolution and enlightenment, we start to see all this industry that comes. Remember, we've been talking about it. Factories being built, people moving to cities. There's a lot of pollution, right? We talked about that. Pollution and a lot of people working long, hard hours. That people start to get the idea that that sort of thing is bad. And that we should return to a simpler and kinder, more rural kind of life. They idealize it. They romanticize it. They get nostalgic for it. I don't know. You guys probably haven't been alive long enough to be nostalgic for too much. Maybe a little, say, oh, remember what it was like when we were in elementary school and the TV shows we used to watch? Or, I don't know, some kind of food that you couldn't get, you can't get now, you used to get. You start to romanticize. You say, wow, it was really great back in whatever. I guess, I don't know what it'd be for you guys, like 2005. We don't even have a name for that decade, right? The 2000s, or I don't know. I want to call that decade the aughts, because, a zero is like an aught. Call that the aughts, and then we call this the teens. It hasn't caught on, but we need a name for that decade. But that's sort of the decade, your guys' decade, right? Well, most of you when were you born? Born like late 90s, early 2000s, something like that probably. Most of you have 18, 19. So this is 2018. So anyway, maybe you're nostalgic for 2010. Seems strange to me anyone would be nostalgic for 2010, but maybe you are, 8 years ago. The TV shows, it was so different back then. The internet wasn't nearly as developed. Well, anyway. But people get nostalgic. They get nostalgic for music. They get nostalgic for fashion. That's why I tell you, I look like I'm out of fashion, but I'm just so far ahead of fashion that it looks like I'm behind. Like 10 years from now, you'll be wearing what I'm wearing, and you'll think it's really, really great. Right? Well, maybe not. Anyway, but you get the idea. People say, oh yeah, I'm going to get that look of the 70s, the 80s, or 90s, or whatever. The music comes back. Now we're bringing back TV shows from like 20 years ago and, remaking them, stuff like that. Well, this is sort of the idea of romanticism. And if you've studied the 1960s in the United States, and you've heard about the hippies and all that kind of counterculture stuff, the romantic movement is a lot like that as well. It's going against the dominant thing in the culture that was industrialization, science, and all that sort of thing. And it's a reaction to industrialization. It's a reaction to the scientific revolution. And it's a reaction against classical thinking. You remember when they start to talk about the Middle Ages, right? The Middle Ages is the middle of what? It's the middle between classical thinking, like Greco-Roman thought, and the thinking of the Enlightenment. All that stuff in the middle is called the Middle Ages, or the medieval period, or the Dark Ages, where really nothing good happened. And now we have this rebirth, this renaissance of the Greco-Roman stuff, and everything's great. And now we got science, and we got technology, and we're building machines, and trains, and train tracks, and factories. People are moving to the cities, and we got all this urban stuff going on. But then some people are saying, look, it was better in the good old days. You go to the city and you see it's just the whole sky is filled with coal smoke. The smoke from factories, pollution, air pollution. You got coal dust. People hang out their laundry to dry, like a white sheet or something. It turns gray because of all the dust, all the coal dust in the air. Everything gets gray. The ground gets gray. The water is polluted. We have so many people in the city, we don't have the sewers right, and it smells. People are working long, hard hours in the factories. People are getting divided from their families. They're moving from their hometowns, their villages. They're moving to the city. Nobody there will help them. People take advantage of them. Somebody gets sick and dies. Nobody comes over to help you. You see? If you got sick in the village, well, your family, your friends, they all know you. They'll bring food over. They'll come and say, can we help you? But not in the city, right? City, we don't care. We don't know you. We don't want to know you. So there were a lot of things that people said, the city life is harsh. It's dirty. It's polluted. It smells, literally. The work in the factories is also hard, and the division of family. Let's go back to the good old days when we lived out in the countryside. We were farming the land. Fresh air, sunshine, good times, family. Right? Well, it's somewhat nostalgic because some of that wasn't that great a time, right? You had to work really hard on the farm as well, and you could have a bad crop, and people could get very hungry, and some bad things could happen then as well. But romanticism is going to emphasize the stuff that the Enlightenment people hated. Like architecture. Like I said, Neo-Gothic architecture from the Gothic architecture. In artwork, here's a picture. Look at this picture. When you look at that picture, what's the first thing that you see? What do you focus on? You got a guy in the center, right? But the guy's not looking at you, is he? You're not going to have a classical painting. Maybe you could find some example, but basically, you're not going to have the main subject of a classical painting that's a guy who's not looking at you. What is the guy in the picture looking at?
He's reflecting.
Well, he's thinking, right? He's thinking, he's looking. Well, he's looking out. Look over that vista. Look at it. Mountains. Fog. Trees. Nature. And basically, the guy in the painting that first catches your eye is basically telling you, don't look at me. Look at what I'm looking at. Look at nature. Look at how great it is when people don't mess it up. Look at how beautiful the mountains are and the trees. So in these paintings of this period, you see a lot of trees. You see a lot of waterfalls. You see a lot of mountains, lakes and streams. The focus is on nature. The focus is on the beauty and grandeur of nature. And increasingly, people get to be very small, and if they're in there, they're usually observers of the nature. Now, this one, he's front and center. I put it here on purpose because I picked this one because I think he's saying, don't look at me. I'm not even going to show my face. And I walked all the way up here so that I could look at this view. And that's what you ought to be looking at too, because this is beautiful nature. And what is also implied is that people have not messed this up yet. You don't see any train tracks. You don't see any smokestacks. You don't see any cities. You don't see any roads or bridges. You see mountains, trees. And so that's the kind of thing the Romantics were interested in. Simple rural life, which, yes, they probably made better than it was. They were imagining it to be better than probably it was. But they also had a lot of stuff in their life, a lot of stuff in the cities that were bad. Pollution, prostitution, alcoholism, violence, smokestacks, crowded living, long hours. Wasn't it better back on the farm when we all worked with each other, with our family, and we went out and we kind of pitched together, and then we all had dinner together, and it was Mom's cooking. Wasn't that great? Wouldn't you like to have some of Mom's whatever, right? Apple pie or baked whatever that she makes. Wouldn't that be nice to be around the table with the family again? We've been out working hard on our own land, and now we come in, we just smell that food, and we sit down at the table, and then we talk with one another. We're not doing that anymore. We're going to the factory. I'm there 12, 14 hours a day. By the time I get home, everybody else is asleep, right? Everybody's so tired they don't want to do anything like that. I'm working 6 days a week for somebody else in a dirty place. So, peasants. They focus on peasants. They focus on mysticism. Mysticism doesn't fit very well with a scientific theory. Very rational. You do A plus B, you get C. You also find out, people, I don't know, maybe it's just been my experience, but I find that people are not always very logical. People do things that don't make, at least to me, any sense. Somebody says they're going to do this, and I'm like, what? Why? That doesn't make any sense. Because people are very emotional. People react to things emotionally. And that's what the Romantic period is going to say. Look, you guys have left religion, spirituality, emotions. You're just saying people are machines. And they function like those machines in your factories. And it's not like that. And so they go back to mystical ideas. They focus on nighttime, or actually the transition from day to night, because things that happen at night are not as well known as things that happen in the day. It's a symbolism, but it's also, I think, true. They also focus on things like dreams. You're awake, right now. Well, some of you. And so you're hearing things and you're understanding. I hope you're understanding things. But when you start to go to sleep, and you're kind of in that place between being awake and being asleep, and maybe you hear something, are you really hearing that? Or are you dreaming that? And you start to dream, and you ever had a dream that you thought was so real that when you woke up that it had actually happened, and then you finally figured out it didn't? That was the kind of thing they wanted to focus on. Where did that come from? Where is that world? The world of dreams, the world of twilight, the world of darkness. So their literature gets very dark. You get the book like Frankenstein, right? Dr. Frankenstein creating a monster. He's using technology, right? Electricity and stuff. He's going to reanimate because he can control nature, and he creates this monster. And then when the people see it, they all want to kill it, right? Well, or Edgar Allan Poe, or all those kinds of stories. Well, Romanticism is going to emphasize the tragic. The tragic. For example, here's a story. It's by this guy, Johann Wolfgang Goethe, very famous German author that I'm sure you've all read in school. Well, anyway, one of his most famous novels is called The Sufferings of Young Werther. Poor young Werther. Like so many young men, he fell in love with a lady. And guess what? The lady won't give him the time of day. Right? The lady doesn't care. But she doesn't understand how much he loves her. How everything in his mind revolves around her. He wants to know what she's doing all the time. He wants to see her, but yet she rejects him. And so he does the only rational thing to do. He kills himself.
Who was the lady?
Who was the lady?
Yeah,
Well, it turns out she was married.
did she have a name? What was her name?
You'll have to read the story. I got to get you to read some of this stuff. Well, his love is unreturned, unrequited love. And so ultimately he takes his own life. Why? Life is not worth living if I can't be with her. There's some love songs like that, right? I can't go on living without you. I don't want to go on living without you. Suicide.
She was married.
Doesn't matter. Love conquers all. Well, anyway, we see then a kind of individualism, a rebellion against the establishments, the sufferings of young Werther. Poor Werther. Perhaps some people here have unrequited love. I don't want to open up any wounds. Also, the passion for the past, medieval things, the passion for peasants. They go out and they gather up the stories of the peasants. These are people nobody cared about. You think Enlightenment thinkers? You think Descartes and these guys go out and interview peasants? No, they don't talk to peasants, right? What do peasants know? They're uneducated. But you know what? The peasants have a lot of stories. And there's a couple of brothers named Grimm who go out and collect the stories of the peasants. Why are they doing it? Because they believe that the stories of the peasants hold in them truth and knowledge that we need to share with people. So they gather them and they collect them. You know, like the story of Little Red Riding Hood. You know, have you ever actually read, you know, not the kind of stuff they put in kids' books, but the real fairy tales? They're pretty gruesome. They get cleaned up, you know, and kind of made less violent for kids. You know, they cut open the wolf, right, and they pull Grandma out because she was eaten. Well, anyway, there's a lot of stuff in there. But notice they're in the woods. The woods are scary, mystical. You got animals. You got talking animals, right? This is all strange stuff, but it's all stories that were there. So they are attracted to the bizarre, the unusual. Think of Edgar Allan Poe, The Raven. Think of what's he call it? The Telltale Heart, right? Where the guy kills somebody and he starts to hear the heart beating because he buried the guy under the floor and he can hear it and he goes crazy and he rips up the floor. Oh, they love that kind of stuff, right? I already talked about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as another. Well, that's the kind of stuff. And then here you see the picture of Big Ben and the Parliament building. And you see how it's built in a way like a Gothic cathedral with spires and flying buttresses and all this other sort of architectural stuff. We won't highlight here more than that. And there's Little Red Riding Hood. See how nice she is? Very happy. Just gathering flowers in the woods, no problems. Well, a lot of artwork then is going to, like I said, will focus on nature. And here's a couple of examples. Caspar David Friedrich, famous German romantic painter. But take a look. There are people in this picture. You see them? They're right here. There's a guy right there. He's in a boat. Got to really look for him now. Because you're supposed to look at the mountains, the fog. And then take a look at this one. Here's a man and a woman. They fit right in. They're shaded right in. They're looking out at the moon. That's what the title of the thing is. I think it's Man and Woman Looking at the Moon, something like that, by Friedrich. And here you see the mystical elements, the natural elements of this whole thing. So that's what the Romantic movement is in a nutshell, and it's a reaction to industrialization, scientific movement, revolution, and it's also then gets blended in with nationalism. It's just now 1:15, so you guys are standing up like I'm going overtime, but go ahead and go, but I would appreciate it that you wait till I'm done. We'll see you later.